Let's take a look at the 8 Arctic nations looking down above the North Pole. Going clockwise from the top is Russia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Greenland, Canada and the United States, with the state of Alaska. Now, Russia is by far the largest player, controlling just over half of the total coastlines, with its northern fleet of over 70 nuclear submarines and warships, and operating more than 50 military installations, including air bases, radar stations and border posts. Now, let's take a look at the countries around the South China Sea. We have 7 nations: Taiwan, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, Vietnam and China. While China does not have the longest coastline, that would be Vietnam. China uses the so-called 9- or 10- line to claim most of the entire sea, including parts of the 6 other countries' exclusive economic zones, or EEZs. Despite its sweeping claims being thrown out by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in 2016, China has actively expanded its military and economic activities within the 9- line, just as Russia has in the Arctic. Now, moving back to Greenland, the Arctic, and Donald Trump, the US president, says this.
We have a very good relationship with Denmark, as you know, we'll see. But, we're doing the Golden Dome, we're doing a lot of things, and we really need it. If we don't go in, Russia's going to go in, and China's going to go in. And there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it, but we can do everything about it.
Mark, so just picking up on what Donald Trump said there, just very quickly, can you explain why Greenland is important for the US's Golden Dome, and also why China and Russia have criticized this project so much? At the same time, is there a parallel sort of early warning system for the South China Sea?
The president has made Golden Dome a significant part of his first budgets, and his national security strategy was emphasized defense of the homeland. So the Golden Dome aims to create a protective bubble or dome around the United States against incoming missile threats, conventional ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, cruise missiles. And to do that, you will have a lot of equipment in space, but we'll also have a lot of equipment, what's called an underlayer, looking up with radars and with sensors and weapon systems. Those radars are forward stationed in a place like Greenland or Alaska, or on the northern edges of Canada, which is called the Dew Line. These are important because that gives increased early warning and increased visibility, in terms of the Greenland one, to look into Russian launches for incoming missiles headed to the United States. These are going to get to us very fast, and our command and control centers would not have enough time without it. So we need it. Now, China and Russia don't like this because they say it's destabilizing on nuclear deterrence. It's the United States considering building an ability to strategically stop a nuclear attack, and instead of relying on the conventional mutual assured destruction. There's a lot of reasons why that argument probably doesn't hold water. This is really about conventional missiles, not ballistic missiles, and China is not willing to sign on to any strategic arms limitations agreements in any case. And finally, if I look at it versus the South China Sea, as you asked, there are really important early warning systems spread throughout multiple countries in the South China Sea. Japan has a very intricate, layered early warning system. Taiwan has a strong early warning system. The Philippines has good warning systems that the United States has provided them over the years.
Thank you, Mark. President Lai, again, I want to quote from the US's 2024 Arctic strategy. It says that China is focusing on the Arctic as a global commons in order to shift Arctic governance in its favor, and that non-Arctic states should contribute to the region's, quote, shared future for mankind. Also, its Polar Silk Road is about investments in the natural resources of the Arctic, also building infrastructure there, and it includes in the territory of some of these NATO allies. How would you compare China's interests and approach between the Arctic and the South China Sea?
Basically, China takes the South China Sea as 90% of the water is its own territory. So China, what they believe is, I'll exclude everything else. I'll just protect what is mine. And although I think that its legal claim does not hold any water. But in the Arctic issues, and right now China is looking for access and try to present itself as a near Arctic state, although it knows itself is not a Arctic state, but try to present itself as a near Arctic state. And the Chinese interest in the Arctic basically coming from two angles. The first one is that as the climate change shifts, makes it the northern route, the northern sea route, northwestern sea route that become available. And China started to look at as a possible solution for China to get away from the Malacca dilemma and everything else from coming from the Persian Gulf to the Indian Ocean and to China Sea, its coast. China wanted to explore different routes for the gas and other the oil import. Another thing about it is that China also look at the Arctic as the possible Chinese influence to influence both the United States and the European. And then since year 2023, there's a tremendous increase in terms of China and Russia cooperations. And we see all kinds of different military and commercial activity associated with those, including some of Chinese ships that operate with the Russian to cut out the cable as well as the gas line that connecting Estonia and Finland and Estonia and Sweden.
So are you saying, in effect, China is treating the Arctic as if it was the South China Sea, which it claims entirely?
It's a little bit different. China knows itself it does not have the legal claim over anything, the territory in the Arctic, but it wanted to increase its access and also work with Russia in order to influence both the European countries and the United States as well as Canada.
Okay. Sana, can we draw any parallels? I mean, what we know about the South China Sea is that really early on, 1990s, perhaps even earlier, China already had a plan to take over this sea. It started to, so-called establish, fishing outposts, which it always had the plan to then develop and then militarize.
I think I would agree with President Lai here that in my view, it's not an exact replica of China's South China Sea playbook. Because if we look at the South China Sea, China is a resident power. So its tendencies are very coercive, revisionist. And if we look at it, the activities include gray zone activities, militarization, and intimidation. But then if we look at the Arctic, what China is doing, China is projecting a narrative that it is going there to use global common, and it is for the good of the world.
But is that what it's saying now? Give it 30 years, perhaps that changes.
Yeah, so I think...
It can change the facts on the ground like it did with the South China Sea.
Absolutely. So I think if you just look at it right now, it's just data collection and cooperation with Russia. And data collection supports future naval space and missile deployment. But then, we can't really talk about what is going to happen in the next 30 years.
Mark, bringing you back in, how about the alliance structures? For example, how does the first island chain in the Indo-Pacific, or even second, compare with essentially the NATO ally flank in the Arctic?
Well, I'd have to say there's a before Trump and after Trump to this, in the sense that for my 35-year career in the military, I would have seen any effort to undermine a NATO country, like a Russian intervention or interference in Greenland, as a cause for the United States and the rest of NATO to very aggressively act against Russia. But there has obviously been a change in how the president looks at this. President Trump looks at this versus predecessors. But I would say traditionally, Greenland, as part of Denmark, has been treated as a key asset in NATO and one that must be defended by NATO. And in fact, NATO runs annual or biannual exercises. Operation Arctic Endurance, one of which is starting up this month, with a number of NATO countries coming into Denmark for exercises. Different than that, in the South China Sea, the United States has bilateral alliances with Japan and Korea, and the Philippines and Thailand, and then a partnership with Taiwan anchored in the Taiwan Relations Act. These are very different types of alliances, and they're very much bilateral. Recently, under President Trump, he's kind of treated all allies and partners consistently in a way that causes some discomfort.
Does it go across sort of both regions, though, Mark? I mean, does it appear that the US has relegated, the NATO or the EU allies to looking after, say, Europe, and he has elevated the Arctic Circle to be somewhere where he believes only the US can defend. However, Asia appears to be different. They are keen to invest and engage in the allies there. I mean, is it just proximity to the US homeland that we're talking about?
So I do think that the defense of the homeland is part of his increased interest in Greenland. Again, I can't account for all of it and for why just demanding that the Danes do more in Greenland is not enough. But certainly that proximity, that role in homeland defense does have a significant role.
President Lai, we have established that there are some parallels between the Arctic and the South China Sea or the Indo-Pacific. Sana said that we cannot talk now about 30 years in the future. What's your view on that? I mean, surely we can't rule out an Arctic where China has much more involvement. Perhaps, it has attempted to buy territory, isn't it, from some of the European states. That's been knocked back so far. Can we rule out that China might do something similar, grey zone followed by militarization, salami slicing, that sort of thing in the Arctic?
I think what China really want to do something similar to what they did to the state around the South China Sea. China need to work with Russia. China cannot operate by itself and go in there to intimidate everyone else in the Arctic. China right now does not have the kind of capabilities, that kind of projection power. You just look at the icebreaker that China has. Although China has more icebreaker probably than the United States, but the icebreaker, they are not nuclear powered.
But we're not talking about right now. We're talking about the future.
Yeah, but I have to say that 30 years, that's a very long time. And a lot of things can happen between now and then.
I think what we're trying to see is, all these reasons behind why Trump is acting like this with regard to Greenland. I mean, for the South China Sea, they've been accused of being asleep at the wheel.
I think the issue is more about that you look at Greenland, that's such a strategically important places, but you only have like 200-something people guarding them. So I think that's why all the controversy started to come out. If you don't do that, and I have to do that for myself.
You want to jump in?
So China does have objectives. China is shaping norms and narratives, but it doesn't have capabilities. And in the next 30 years, what is going to happen, we do not know. And objectives do not really account for actions.